Good evening, Shortcuts. Stephen here. This is the heads up video preview for a couple of lists that are going to go out on Wednesday, the 24th of May. We have jazz, soundtracks, sealed records, reggae, blues tonight. And a very varied bunch it is too. I think there may be some things for you all to explore. So firstly, I reached out to a very old friend of mine who's in Europe. I started a music magazine, kind of co-started a music magazine back in Ireland a long time ago, and got to chat to some folks who I knew back then. And they sent me a box of sealed records with all sorts of interesting things in it, way below the prices you pay in the shops, and really, really interesting. So I'm going to start with some of those, and then we'll take it from there. All right, we're going to start with this. Pharoah Sanders, Karma. You can see that's on the acoustic sounds series from the original Verve. I think it's on the Verve label, but this is an Impulse record. Pharoah Sanders, 1969. What do I say about this record? I listened to it for the first time tonight. Never played it before. They sent me 3 copies. I'm keeping one. It is, to my mind, a more accessible successor to A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. I find A Love Supreme mystifying. I cannot get my head around it. I find it dissonant to the point of alienation. It just turns me off. My first experience of this record is that it is equally spiritual. Pharoah Sanders makes it pretty clear. The opening track is, and I say track, it's 30 odd minutes split across 2 sides, and it's called The Creator Has a Master Plan. And so you can't help but, you can reach a conclusion as to what this album is about. And even I don't want to open this one because it's sealed, but you can see the whole album exudes spirituality. It's got chanting, it's got these amazing violin melodies, which is kind of unusual in jazz. Of course, Pharoah Sanders himself. It's really something. And this pressing, oh my gosh, it is amazing to listen to. It's the sort of record where you have to just kind of close your eyes and let it wash over you. I've got a couple like that. There's another one that I have called, I can never find other copies, otherwise I'd bring them to you, called Peace and Love by Dadawa, in 1974 spiritual reggae album, which I absolutely adore. And I think this is cut from the same cloth. I think this will be a record that I treasure. There are 2 others I encourage you to explore. It is, it's not Taylor Swift. But I've kind of halfway fallen in love with it already. Now, this band I've been in love with for a long time, The Upsetters. This is a triple album released on the Music on Vinyl label, primarily, I think, focused primarily on the UK. It's called Build the Ark, and it's you can see here it's The Upsetters with Lee Perry and friends, and that means that you've got a collection of Trojan reggae and dub from predominantly the mid-70s that is second to none. You've got obviously the Upsetters, Leo Graham, Wynton Haywood. You've got some of the really early studio dub that Lee Scratch Perry did. The Congos are in here, of course. They're all part of that scene. It's really something. And look, I've been looking for this for a while. It was one of the reasons I pinged them. There's a couple of copies of this as well. This. So Idris Muhammad, born Leo Morris, just outside New Orleans. Recorded, was a session drummer in the teenage years. He played drums on Blueberry Hill by, I think it's Fats Domino. Like as far back as that, he played with Sam Cooke. He obviously changed his, faith and became Idris Muhammad, who played on at least 150, maybe 200 plus recordings on jazz labels and other labels through the late 50s into the early 70s. But when he was on the Kudu label in the 70s, he got to record some records as a band leader. Started with Black Rhythm Revolution, and this I think is his second, House of the Rising Sun. Man, where do I start with the musicians on this record? Idris Muhammad, Jeff Beck, Eric Gale, George Devons on percussion, who was a Kudu legend. Fred Wesley plays trombone. Of course, Fred Wesley being the band leader of the JBs, John James Brown's backing band. There's a string section of violins, multiple violins and cellos, various vocalists. Every one of them is at the top of their power. I challenge you, not within the first 20, 30 seconds of listening to his first song on this track, which is the title track, I challenge you not to go, I want this. It's that good. And Japanese pressings of this are just hen's teeth. This music on vinyl pressing, on bright orange vinyl, is really well regarded. I'm loath to open it because I want to keep it sealed. I have it on, my friends wouldn't have sent me those without there being good reason. Love this album. I'll put a playlist together. Idris Muhammad, just a genius. Seriously, an amazing musician. There's a couple more. Look, talking about amazing musicians. There's this. This is the 30th or the 50th anniversary double album of What's Going On. It was remastered, but then an additional disc was put into this package with stripped down versions of the classic tracks. So like What's Going On stripped almost down to an acoustic guitar. There's a string version of What's Going On. There are the original mono singles of let me just get the exact list. Oh yeah, What's Going On, God Is Love, Mercy Mercy Me, Inner City Blues, Holy Holy. Those original mono singles are quite revelatory. It's one of these records where the second disc is great. You don't leave the second disc in the package and go, why did I even bother? Still sealed, fraction of what it's going to cost in the shops, probably 50% off. I don't know what. It's, again, I'm passing these on because they're just incredible price points, incredible value. Enter the Wu-Tang. Not just one of the great hip-hop debuts, one of the great debuts, full stop, on limited edition yellow vinyl. I think Cream, Cash Rules, Everything Around Me is Bring the Neck. Oh, not Bring the Neck, what's it called? Bring the Ruckus. Protect Your Neck. Anyway, stellar record. Pressings in the past have been terrible. They've found a way to improve this album. Vinyl Me Please did a version of this record, which I think is pretty special. This is the final sealed record. This is one of Vinyl Me Please's greatest ever presses. It's their recent repress of Jailbreak, Thin Lizzy, kind of vibrant orange, cut by Kevin Gray, a coherent audio. In fact, if you can see here, the inlet, this is all silver foil, but this is actually the cover of a book, and the book slides out, and it's really, the book forms kind of listening notes. It's pretty great. All right, I've got some reggae now before we move into some soundtracks. This is the Japanese first press of Signing Off, the debut album by UB40. And of course, UB40 being the unemployment form, and the cover of the album being the unemployment form that the band members would have been signing off to claim the dole in the UK in the late 70s. By a mile, UB40's best album. I don't think it's even close. This is a little bit different. This record is Outlaw Dub, The Revolutionaries. They were effectively Studio One's house band. Studio One being a ska label in Jamaica. The label that brought the likes of Sly and Robbie through. Studio One was also not infamous, just generally famous for having these amazing female reggae vocalists as well. One of my greatest compilations is a compilation of Studio One women, just amazing. But this record's great, and it's got Obi and everything. But this features Sly Dunbar on drums, and yeah, it's Outlaw Dub. So closing on the table, it's echoey. But it's not clangy. It's quite palatable. I think it's a lovely record. Now, I got two soundtracks, and they could not be more different. I'm going to show you them both. Is the soundtrack to Michael Antonioni's Zabriskie Point, a follow-up to probably his magnum opus movie Blow Up. This one wasn't quite so well received, but I'll talk about the soundtrack in a sec. And this, Pierre Bachelet's soundtrack to that soft porn classic Emmanuel. Now, why this? Well, this is a surprisingly interesting record. I've had this for ages, and when I saw this Japanese copy, I thought I have to grab a couple of copies and put one out to you folks, because I kid you not, this record reminds me. I'm not saying it was an influence. I'm not saying, but this record is so Brian Eno. It really is. It's like I could not tell you if you'd played some of the tracks in this record and said this is from Ambient 3, I'd go, yeah, makes sense. Yeah, this is Brian Eno. I get this. It's not the knowing, debauched kind of porno, rumpage that you might expect. This is really subtle and really pretty in places. Now, Zabriskie Point it's in the argument for the greatest soundtrack of all time. One of my favorite stories about this, because I was the chair of my university's cinema, the Queen's Film Theatre in Belfast, in my final year at university, and I fell in love with Zabriskie Point when we did an Italian cinema festival in my final year. It's a very odd movie. It's beautiful in its own way, but it's not for everyone. It's very indulgent. But the soundtrack features kind of this interesting merging of Grateful Dead and Pink Floyd. In fact, when I was researching the festival, when I was curating it, one of my favourite facts was that Antonioni commissioned Pink Floyd to put some songs together for the soundtrack. One of them he rejected as not being good enough, and that song went on to become Us and Them in a little known record called The Dark Side of the Moon. Now, the songs that he did accept are on this soundtrack, and they are the highlight. The Pink Floyd tracks on this record are fabulous. You can see here, it's the Japanese first press, so everything's still Japanese, but the track names are in English on the label. I played it over the weekend. My missus wasn't impressed, but she's wrong. It's great. All right, so here's a couple of actually 3 interesting jazz records before we hit some blues. I've been listening to this podcast on Spotify called 1001 Album Complaints, and it's this bunch of kind of muso guys playing a range of bands in the US, and they decided to do detailed breakdowns of records from Robert Demery's book 1001 Albums to Listen to Before You Die, which I think it was in the 80s or 90s, because it's been around, this book. Anyway, one of the episodes that I listened to recently was a dissection of this Brilliant Corners by Thelonious Monk. Now, I'm not a Thelonious Monk aficionado by any stretch. I don't own any Thelonious Monk except the Vinyl Me Please Jazz Record of the Month. This month is Monk's Music by Thelonious Monk, which is on its way. I haven't heard it. So this record was recorded on the Riverside label, and it features Sonny Rollins, and probably most importantly for me anyway, is Max Roach on drums. The drums on this record are really cool. Really, I mean, what a drummer. I mean, considering these guys were going in and knocking out these sessions pretty live. Interestingly, the title track, which Thelonious Monk wrote, was so complex. It's kind of like an 8/8/9 rhythm that the band, and by the way, these band members are phenomenal musicians. They really struggled with it. They took 25 takes, and the take that made it onto the record was 2 takes spliced together. Not all, and it's a cacophonous piece. It's something else. Not all the music is quite as challenging as that. Some of it is really pretty and beautiful. In fact, there's one song on the side too, which is just Thelonious Monk solo on the piano, and it's hypnotic. The very last track has almost a new band, because the other band kind of left him and said, "You're too hard, mate. This is tough. This is too hard work." But I think that's what makes it. By the way, all of these American dudes who play rock music all said that they loved that. So that's an interesting recommendation. Now, this is one I've never had before. This is Duke Ellington featuring Mahalia Jackson, the renowned gospel singer. And this record is kind of got an unusual name. It's called Black, Brown and Beige. And it's a political statement that Duke Ellington had attempted to record a few times and had played live on a few occasions, and it had got rapturous reception, but he was never able to get it down on tape until he recorded it with Mahalia Jackson. Just read some of the reviews and delve in. It isn't something that a lot of us will have in our collection, but when you hear it, it's a beautiful piece. This is the more accessible end of piano jazz, where you've got Thelonious Monk, who's hitting 8/8/9 rhythms and dropping in on the third beat and doing all sorts of weird, wonderful things. The Night Train by Oscar Peterson Trio is short, pithy, beautiful, mellow, perfect pieces of jazz, and it's many people's favorite jazz album of all time for a reason. It's super pretty. All right, I know I'm talking way too much. I've got 4 blues records here. I've got actually 5, and I'm just going to do a very quick pass through. Now, 2 of them are by the blues era Fleetwood Mac. This being my favourite Fleetwood Mac album, and it's not even close. This is Then Play On, their 3rd album with Peter Green as the band leader, and it has one of the greatest gatefolds there ever was. Look at that. It's spectacular. That's the band. Rattle, Shake, Snake, Like Crying, Closing My Eyes. This one comes with an Obi. If you don't have this record, listen and love. This English Rose is a compilation. It was US only and then became, released in Japan, various other places. This is Mick Fleetwood in drag, by the way. This has got a mixture of songs from Mr. Wonderful, Fleetwood Mac's 2nd album, and Then Play On, some tracks that had at that point not been released, but then made it onto Then Play On, and some singles. And it's pretty fantastic. Again, Japanese pressing, I love it. I've always, this Shortcuts has kind of been a mouthpiece for Fenton Robinson, and I was delighted. He was inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame in 2023. This record is called Fenton Robinson, the Mellow Blues Genius. I could not have put it better. This is a compilation of his kind of 2 best albums for the Alligator label and a couple of other kind of tracks as well. I love Fenton Robinson. All right, now, 2 more blues records. How about this? The latest edition, John Mayall. You can see there he's got a leg and a cast, and here he is. You can see on the inside sleeve. He must have broken his leg or done something. Which, of course, John Mayall being legendary for having short recording sessions, so they would have just gone into the studio and knocked that record out in a few hours. Crusade, which was just before this one, infamously he recorded in 7 hours. So, it's got some rough edges, but it's got harmonica, 2 dueling guitarists. It's a lot of fun. Now, this is one of my favourite Stax albums. Albert King, Years Gone By. This was his follow-up to Born Under a Bad Sign, which was also on the Stax label, which was his Stax debut. But that record was predominantly a collection of singles and B-sides and other things. And of course, it's wonderful, it's a classic, everyone knows it. This was the record he released right after. This is his first true debut. This was a singular piece. He went in and recorded this and released it as his own record. And of course, everyone thinks Born Under a Bad Sign is his debut, and of course it is. But this is his true debut, I think, and it's great. Can't recommend it highly enough. On the Stax label. Oh, every record tonight, by the way, other than the sealed records, Japanese. I'm going to finish with this little anomaly, this little quirky thing. This is the Australian Jazz Quartet on 10-inch, a special release on the Bethlehem label. Now, the Australian Jazz Quartet were 4 jazz musicians. 3 of them were Australian, 1 of them was American. And they toured with the likes of Dave Brubeck and others back in the day. So they were US based. I do think this reissue is beautiful. If you ever see this, I don't think you can see this, TOJJ. This was the kind of the label, or let's call it the matrix number, that was a campaign of late 70s, early 80s, really high quality represses by a bunch of Japanese, I think predominantly Toshiba EMI. I've got quite a few. Man, the sound quality's pretty great. And what a fantastic sleeve. All right, and I call it my longest video. My apologies for rabbiting on so much, but that's because I love these jazz and blues records. These are my lifeblood. So yeah, I hope there was something in there that intrigued you. I'll put a playlist together. As always, if you want to hear anything or see any more or pictures or any questions, drop me a line. Love the feedback. Love the fact that you're sharing these videos. People are subscribing. Leave comments and all that good stuff. And thank you so much for watching.